Okay, everyone, we're going to get started here. Sorry for the odd audio there, but we're going to be working on the Antilia design document here. And it's going to be a little different because there isn't a lot here to look at as far as a lot of visuals, but there is a lot of information, and it's part of the process that we have to go through in developing Antilia. So we're going to kind of start by going through some of the points that we've covered already previously and expanding on them, and then we'll go ahead and do just kind of like our typical brainstorming process. Oh, let's go ahead and make this live. There we go. Probably the
Greetings and
worst. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, yeah. Well, I just wanted to say greetings and salutations to everyone. So,
Probably the worst intro to a video ever, but whatever, let's move on. So the first thing on my list here is as we start working on Antilia this month, I'll be working specifically on character movement and the camera systems. So I wanted to go back through this document and those portions and just kind of touch on where do we get to them? I don't know if we had any section for camera movement before, did we? Because I think we actually missed that whole category, really. Movement, yeah, we go straight into movement.
well, what's well, okay, 1.5.
Yeah, I think we should probably go ahead and insert a point here. Let me think. We don't have to get too picky about where in the hierarchy or in the topic list it goes. So I'm just gonna stick it here at the end for now, and we can move it later.
hmm Yeah, the camera is quite important because often, for example, third view can be exploited to gain you some like advantages in games.
Yeah, and I don't know why Google Docs is so weird sometimes. I don't know why it thinks that this heading has to go on a separate page, but we'll deal with it. So yeah, I'm just thinking about the topics here. 1.5 point.
Even in the MMO, we had both the first person
Yeah,
view and the third person view.
I'm gonna start with third person for now because that's kind of the default where we usually begin with. One thing I did in the MMO, and I don't want to make that same design decision, was I put the camera controls as part of the movement system, and I really want to break that this time. And I want to make sure that we also have an independent camera system, which is why I made this third bullet here, such that. Sorry, you cut out there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was about to mention that uh, like having separate camera from movement is quite actually handy at times, so you can run and look behind you if something's chasing you.
And also, I think it actually, in the final version of the MMO, it actually shipped that way that you could switch between the normal camera and a free movement camera. I don't know if anyone discovered that you could do it. I believe I did it mostly for creating videos for Kickstarter. I don't think that that's necessarily what we need, and I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of cinematics that we have to account for the camera for. I'm just trying to think, will we have instances where we take control of the camera where the player has no control of the camera? That didn't happen in the MMO, but I'm trying to think, is there a scenario where that might happen here?
Mm.
I can't think of one. Still, we should at least have a independent camera mode, so I'll put a note in there. And yeah, this is basically, I think, what this video is going to be like, is we're just going to kind of go through these topics and just take notes. I'll watch chat. But this is kind of design, this is a lot of what we do, honestly, is just kind of talk about these things, brainstorm them, and write down notes.
I remember back in the very early days of MMO, the free camera top-down view was actually used as a mini-map,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
yeah, but it was too resource intensive.
It worked good on systems that supported, but yeah, it was just one of those, doesn't really need to be there. It was just kind of cool that, yeah, your mini map was actually a camera pointed straight down, because you could see enemies running around on a mini map and stuff that way. I'm trying to get back to where my head was here. Um, Obviously, controls will be continue to be custom configurable. Now, camera controls does have a lot to do with movement. For example, depending on which way your camera is pointing, that determines which direction a character runs. So we'll have to have some tie in between the two, but that's kind of an implementation detail. I
Yeah,
definitely, I definitely want to see a first-person camera perspective that actually works good. In the MMO, you could kind of hack it by like zooming your camera all the way in and putting it a little above your head. But I want one that actually is in the correct physical location, and the character should fade out or something, so it's not in the way. Trying to think if that'll cause problems, because you're going to want to be able to see your sword and stuff moving still. So we'll have to think about, we'll have to brainstorm more how do we make the character's head disappear, but maybe not their arms and equipment. Yeah. Well, let's not get too hung up on that. I just want to make sure there's a note in here for camera behavior, because I don't think there was one before. So.
yeah. I was about to say that in many games I've played before, camera was sort of tied to the movement. So, for example, if you're running, the camera, even if you moved it somewhere else, you kept running the same way, and the camera returned to your back after like 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah. I was thinking too, when it comes time to do combat, I'd like to do, like, in the MMO, basically you just had something in your hand. With this, I'd like to have, like, you can have a weapon that's holstered and just basically switch between having it in your hand and having it packed away. And when you have your weapon in your hand, then I think that the controls we may want to do like a lot of games and actually change the controls a little bit when you're in a combat mode, um, and enable things like strafing and walking, like backpedaling without losing your current sight of your current enemy. Trying to think if that should probably work. I should probably play a few games that have that mechanic and make sure I've thought of everything there. Because I know some games that have that mechanic tend to have some sort of targeting system, so that your character is focused on something. I'd really like to avoid targeting. I don't like targeting systems myself.
There are a few games that have done quite well without the targeting.
Yeah.
One of them I remember being, for example, I think it was like Terra Online, where you actually had to aim before a moving target to hit it, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't. I'm not familiar with that one, so I'm just thinking a little bit as well, looking through these movement systems, because like I said, movement's going to be something I'm going to start focusing on here in the next month. I no, I'm not going to get to things like swimming and diving. That's just, it's not needed for this phase. And that's something I wanted to mention. I should have mentioned it earlier at the video. The design document that we're writing here, this is this does not cover like how we're going to get there. This is kind of like the, the grand vision of how everything is supposed to work, but not everything is going to be, everything in this document is not phase one. How we break that up is outside of this document, basically. So even though we talk about points like swimming, and you might see things on the left that, it's just so far out, we probably shouldn't even be talking about it at this point. I like to have a complete idea of how the game's going to work, but yeah, definitely a lot of this is not going to be included, you know, anytime soon necessarily. Swimming is one of those that kind of jumps out at me. I don't have any immediate plans to implement that, even though when I designed the movement system, I want to make sure it accounts for that so that it's easily expandable so we can add that easily later. But I don't. There's plenty of things that out the door we don't necessarily need very soon. So
Yeah, let's get started with the basics and to like expand from there.
yeah, let me just kind of get my head into programming kind of space here. When it comes time to do movement, because that's what I'm going to be doing next, I'll do it as a separate. I'm not going to do it as a game object component the way we did it in the MMO. I'd like movement to be a higher level system, kind of like camera control. It's a higher level system, probably part of the game mode. And then it'll have different movement modes such as walking, climbing, running, swimming, stealth and sneaking. Yeah. I think we're all pretty good on that. I mean, we've done this before, so I'll change the way I'm doing it to be a little bit more forward thinking, but I don't think we're missing too much in the details here. Go to flying, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, let's move on. This is basically where we left off when we were working on this last time, is it not? Right here?
Indeed.
Yeah. I think for third person perspective, it'll be implemented much like it was before. Was there anything that was fundamentally not working well with that system?
It was so long ago, I can't honestly tell.
Okay, yeah. Can't spell.
By the way, everyone, if you have any questions, just ask them or throw any hints around.
So for first person, the only note I want to make there is
I think we can like fade out the player characters.
yeah, that almost works, but not quite, just because that would include their weapons and armor. And we still, typically in first-person view, you still want to see the hand holding the sword. You don't just want a floating sword. So we'll have to do some tricks there to figure out how that's going to work.
Well, you can fade out the head, although if you look down, you'll see the sort of like the inside of your
Yeah.
neck and inside of your body.
And the head is not a separate mesh, so yeah, getting into the details, not a big deal. We'll figure that out. And that is something I do want to think about, though, is the whole, some games take a body awareness approach to first person, first person specifically. I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done poorly. Just trying to think of an example. I think Subnautica does it, where you can actually kind of look down and see your body. I think one of the Thief games did it fairly successfully. It is a little tricky, though, to get that working so that, you don't look down and see down some weird, head is missing mesh. So we'll have to think about that.
Yeah, those are technical details.
Yeah.
In sorry,
So yeah, let's move on. Interacting with the world, exploration and discovery. In the MMO, the only exploration aspect we had was the little markers, which didn't even do anything. That it was supposed to at least have some sort of counter or some sort of achievement kind of thing. I'm trying to.
well, they did. Oh, sorry, they did provide a bit of lore.
I'm trying to think too. We may want to do something like, in this terms, I was thinking we might want to have something like a map that, as you find significant locations, they appear on your map or something. We've seen that in various games before, Elder Scrolls and whatnot.
You mean like the point of interest markers?
Yeah, basically, and the map is empty, but then as you explore, you start finding things and they appear on your map. Yeah, that's one way to get some exploration um, incentive going on.
Yeah, I sort of imagine it like that. As you start, the map is pretty much empty. However, when you discover a certain location, it will res or not res. It will sort of phase in a little like a building on the map or something that would sort of like a spice up the bare map.
Yeah. I don't expect to have any sort of fast travel mechanic, not in what we might call vanilla. That might be a mod kind of feature. So, normally, yeah, you unlock something that you can quickly return to that location. I don't know if, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that because it breaks, fast travel would instantly break the economy if we allowed it. Um, Magic travel, where you go to a Mages Guild and go, get teleported to another Mages Guild with some accommodating for how much value you're transporting. That allows us to at least control the situation.
I think that was the mechanic that they had in Mages Guilds in Oblivion back like 10 years ago.
Morrowind, I would think.
Morrowind as well.
Morrowind had mark and recall, but it did not have fast travel. Oblivion introduced fast travel.
Aha.
Well, anyway, that's getting a little off the point from exploration discovery, but
While you're typing, I'm gonna ask the answer a bit of
oh, okay, sure, yeah.
like feedback here in the chat. Yeah, for a Gamers channel, we actually never left. It was just a silent year because most of the things we were been doing have been programming the tools with which we will create the game. Sadly, the close to beta, not sure. I'll leave Jeff to answer that.
Yeah, closed beta is too far away. Next step is going to be a yeah, some sort of alpha test. In my mind, there's a difference between alpha and beta. Alpha, it means feature not complete. Beta is more on the side of all the major features are in place. So yeah, we're a long ways from beta. Okay, so back to design here. Resource collection and production. Fishing, I don't expect to change the fishing system a whole lot, other than, yeah, I would like it to be more interactive. In fact, I played with this a little bit when I made that Discord bot. Um, Fishing is one of those things that's been done 1,000 times, so I don't feel like I can be particularly innovative there. Just find a good fishing system and kind of, play by the established rules that people expect from a fishing system is kind of my plan. So
Yeah, no need to sort of invent the wheel twice.
yeah, no need to get crazy as it says here. Hunting, yeah, not really a standalone game system, just some activity that you can do. That does raise the question though of creature drops, and I would like to just make a note that creature drop should be sensible in this respect that I don't want rats dropping swords and pieces of armor. I don't want creatures dropping armor. That's just silly to me. Um, so we'll go with the kind of the naturalistic implementation that you kill an Ichi, you get Ichi meat and chitin or something. And then those it drops crafting materials, and those can be turned into something more interesting. So
Yeah, that's still a question how we will actually include the drops slash loot in the creature. Will it, after you kill the Ichi, will it be like an it will turn into an object you can activate and see its inventory, or the
container.
loot will drop on the ground, or you have to sort of slash at the Ichi and it will drop on the ground?
That's a good question. Yeah, I haven't put a lot of thought into that because hmm
Yeah, let me add it to the document.
yeah, there's advantages and disadvantages to doing it either way. So yeah, one option would be the creature basically once they're dead they become a container. You can access their inventory and take things. That's an okay implementation. It makes it a little weird that typically you want things like dead creatures to disappear. Um, so there's usually some sort of timeout with that. Yeah, the other option would be simply, when a creature is killed, you simply give the item to, the characters involved in the killing. I think that's what we did in the MMO. Late in the MMO, you can actually get Ichi meat off of Ichi, I believe, and it was just a matter of whoever killed the Ichi got the Ichi meat. Very
Hmm.
poor implementation for an MMO, honestly. I'll have to think about that one because that's kind of it's not like a critical decision or anything. It's a little bit of a flavor kind of thing. I'm not going to get stuck on it though. As soon as you're done with that note, we can move on.
Yeah, just a second.
Yeah, I'll have to think on that one just because I can't think immediately off the top of my head. I don't have anything that's like a strong advantage doing it one way or the other. So,
Yeah, I think I'm done.
yeah, knowing nothing suggests you could have a search gather for loot. That is a possibility. Make it into a skill based thing where having a higher skill would let enable you to find more valuable stuff on the creature. I actually had a note here for one of the things I did want to discuss was how far you know there's different ways to do a game like this as far as how far RPG versus action RPG do you want to go. And the difference I would say is with an RPG, everything kind of tends to be stat oriented. You target a character, you shoot an arrow. Whether or not the arrow hits or misses depends on a statistic. With an action RPG, it's more of a you shoot the arrow, and the stat might just affect how much damage is done, but the hit or miss is determined by your actual physical aim more. Um, and that's something in the MMO, for practical purposes, we had to go more in the direction of an RPG. And now, single player, multiplayer game, I've been trying to lean more in the action direction. So when it comes to things like stats like strength, I think up above a little bit, we have a list of core attributes, and I'm kind of rethinking: do we need core attributes like speed, or is that something we just let the players, responses handle for us? Same with aim. Do we throw in a stat that hurts the character's aim? Personally, I kind of don't like that, but
Well, sort of. You could have a system of buffs and debuffs, of course, but think of trying to hit something while drawing. That's not really
Yeah, and
feasible.
like buffs and debuffs, I understand why from a strategic standpoint those exist in your classic RPG. Personally, I think it's quite a bit of a distraction from the fun almost, unless you're fighting some sort of large, almost like a boss kind of character. To have to start battle out by debuffing the enemy and buffing yourself and all, it just tedious. It's not fun to me. I know there's some people that probably really enjoy that, but it's not my thing. Um, Now we will definitely have status effects, and there will be, attacks and whatnot that include status effects. But as far as like requiring that strategy and just getting so far down the road of, is Antilia trying to be an RPG in the classic sense? I don't think so. It's trying to be a world simulation. So having too many stats, it just, do something and do it well. Don't try to be a pseudo RPG as well. So when it comes to things like looting and having a skill just for looting, is that good design, or is that one of those things that just needs to be left on the cutting room floor? Because there's going to be plenty of other things to do in Antilia.
I'll have to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah. And the same goes
Yeah,
for our next topic here, farming or mushroom growing. When it comes time to harvest mushrooms, you go out there, you find a plant that has, something you can harvest on it. Do we require a skill to harvest it? Because I could kind of see this working both ways. A lot of MMO, or not MMOs, Elder Scrolls games do this where it's a flower, you click on a flower, you get the flower. There is no, skill check.
Yeah, it's sort of sensible because really you can't pick up a mushroom pretty much without even having to know how to do so. Just
Yeah.
pick it out of the ground.
It does make some sense, like, and here I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but in this case, especially with mushrooms, it does make sense that you would need a skill to do it, that you can't just run out there and grab mushrooms. You would poison yourself.
Well, grabbing mushroom, it's okay. It's just ingesting it that poisons you. But maybe we could be like with the greater knowledge, you can get greater the yield, or what you call it. You would be yielded extra or more rare materials.
See, I like the idea that you see the mushroom. If we're going to have a stat for gathering, perhaps, what did we call this before? We had a name for this. Basic kind of survival skills. Bushcraft.
Oh, bushcraft, yes.
Yeah. I could kind of see a skill for, identifying things like mushrooms. Like if you don't have a certain level of skill, in fact, maybe this is a perk of a discipline. You have to unlock a perk that unlocks a specific type of mushroom, and then you can harvest them. Without that perk, you can't even harvest them. Is what I would assume. Basically, you don't know how to identify those mushrooms yet. And then you have character growth. Now you have, character progression, because initially you can only perhaps get some of the most common mushrooms.
When it comes to mushroom, really, for example, even in real life, here in Czech Republic, Czechs are like hobbits. They like their mushrooms, and they even teach their children how to recognize them from early age. Maybe something like that could be also a thing
Yeah.
in the Taipei society.
Yeah, if you're Tasiyama, you might actually have those skills initially. That's kind of a flavor kind of thing, or maybe a character bonus handicap thing.
hmm Argon Fox says that he's a fan of more having a skill, a perk that might enhance the activity, but the activity itself is guaranteed.
Now, I was thinking when it comes to things like, okay, you're going to shoot an arrow. This is kind of going back to combat here, but you're going to shoot an arrow. You have this kind of problem where the client has to determine what's the trajectory so it can tell the server and the server can tell everybody else what's the trajectory of the arrow. Now, if you add a stat like aim, then, well, it's real easy for the client to aimbot this and just basically that stat goes right out the window. Usually you want the server to determine things like that so that it's not so easy to just cheat the game.
But then, of course, you'd get this weird thing that the server can't handle the load if many activities are happening around, and it's basically you're shooting,
Nah,
but nothing's happening.
This is pure numerical. This isn't a big deal. What I'm thinking though is we could still have an aim stat. Sorry if I go a little mathematical here on us, but basically, if your stat says that you're off by 5%, we might just say you are always off by, 2 degrees or 1 degree or something from where you aimed. The only variable the client gets to choose is 360 degrees where on your tangent is the arrow going to actually miss by. Anyway, I'm going into the math in my head here, but
Yeah, well,
I'm just trying to assume. I'm trying to find a way that we force the client to have to miss. That the server can actually check and see, yes, you could not aimbot that. But that's probably going a little too far for this discussion. So.
Yeah, problem is that if people want to cheat, they're going to do so no matter what we implement.
Yeah, but by that logic, then we shouldn't even. There has to be a. Yeah, there's a gradient here of black and white, but we should choose somewhere in the middle where these are reasonable measures we can take. Going beyond this gets too complicated. But let's not take any measures because that I think kind of leaves the door open a little bit.
Okay, but back to farming and mushroom growing. We went on a bit of a tangent.
That's fine. That's what brainstorming's for.
True.
Is there any comments on here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on to farming.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments in the Twitch chat.
So yeah, we covered gathering more than we did farming. I'll put a note in here. Finally, we're going to take a note. We went on a rant further.
And for everyone who's watching, that's basically how it goes in all of these brainstorms.
Yeah, that's pretty typical of how a lot of these discussions go. We just end up on these rants. Yeah. What's my terrible analogy that I always use? That brainstorming is kind of like exploring a cave, and we all just kind of go our different directions and contribute whatever we find, and then try and figure out, where the gems are and what direction we want to go after we've explored everything. So, trying to do too many things at once here.
Yeah, so the gathering.
Okay. Let's talk about farming. I don't think we've ever talked about farming, have we? We've talked about having it in the game, but I don't know if we've ever actually discussed how it'll work.
Yeah, well, we talked about a lot that there's like farms on the outskirts of Lantros, but that's pretty much it, what I remember.
How do they work? Now, the way I had kind of thought that they would work would be part of the player-owned property system, kind of like how we can edit our buildings. I included a bit of like margin on a lot of buildings, but for a farm, I figured we might have a huge margin. Basically, we would say this 10 by 10 grid is where you can build your house, but then there's a 20 by 20 grid that you cannot build buildings on. but it's still part of your property. It's still area that you can change. Um, I think basically what I'm suggesting is that farms will have basically farmable objects, some sort of like, crop row or planters that you can position as part of editing your structure. Um,
Or lay out a farm, a plot on the ground. That's how it, for example, works in Colony Survival, a new Minecraft-like game that's been released like, I don't know, several weeks ago.
well, the reason I want to include it on a property is because then it establishes ownership. Anything that's on a property, we know who owns it, and that's especially good for NPCs. If we just start plopping down containers, then all the NPCs think that they can just take from it. Whereas if it's part of a property, then an NPC knows that this container belongs to me. I can harvest these plants. I always try to avoid just freely editing the world. I mean, the new engine stuff that I'm building for Antilia should allow that, but it makes me nervous to just, start changing things because it's going to start confusing the NPCs after a while. It's going to break pathfinding and all that stuff. So I prefer not to do it if we can avoid it.
By the way, any idea to what I've written?
Yeah. Let me look at this. Plots include the place to build house. And yeah, it's not so much at the farmlands adjacent, but whatever. That's my new point. I'll just start another here so I don't interrupt you there.
Oh, no problem. Feel free to delete my entry if it's not like relevant to the topic.
I don't know farming terminology. I'm not a farmer. I don't know these things. Um, Rose, I guess.
Yeah, same here. I'm a geologist, so I'm not a farmer.
Tilled soil. I don't know if I spelled it right. Um,
Yes, you spelled it right.
I imagine too, because it's part of the property, you could do basically the same thing indoors as outdoors. So you could have planters of a sort, possibly in a cellar or something where you grow mushrooms. That'd be kind of cool. Or you could have, we've talked about having a kind of like almost a conservatory kind of room. You could build a room in your house with a lot of windows and try and grow something indoors, which might be good for certain plants that, don't like the weather or whatever, where your house happens to be.
Oh, and yes, you mentioned that the like planters and other stuff can be like moved around. They are like placeable.
Yeah. They basically work the same way as furniture. Let me make a note of that. Basically, to move a plant, you have to go or move um, like a row of whatever you call these things, tilled soil, or to move a pot, you have to go into house edit mode and move it as a piece of furniture, basically. Um, but then once it's there, then you can interact with it. Go up to the thing, click on it, put a seed in it, water it, do all that kind of thing. So we've seen similar implementations in games like I'm thinking Ark Survival Evolved. I think Rust does something similar, maybe. It's been a while since I saw Rust.
Actually, I never played it, but I've seen a few videos.
So will farming consist of just crops, or will players be able to have pastures with different farm animals? We've talked about, I think there is a animal handling. Yeah, it's right here. So yeah, animal handling and breeding I'd like to include at some point. We've talked, I know there's certainly fans within the development team of raising Jadao and other critters that we've invented. Um, and we've talked quite a bit about, using, because the Antilia has that mesh morphing capability, so we could kind of do something where we make a few variations of the Jadao mesh, morphs basically, and then allow you to breed Jadao and get different attributes, spiky Jadao or fast Jadao.
Or differently colored Jidao.
Yeah, different colors. Yeah,
Yeah, I do remember TEDx once drew like a small sheet of Jidao coloring.
yeah. We, I think as far as like raising animals, I don't think we'll be able to handle a whole herd of Jadao or anything. It'll probably be somewhat limited on scope. I'm sure some player will try it at some point and find out that yeah, once you have 200 of these things, the game doesn't perform very well.
Yeah, the Jidao can be like handling stuff can be uh, like classified under animal handling and breeding
Yeah,
down in 1.6 to 6.
but that raises an interesting question just about where do these creatures, when you're raising them, where do they belong? I suppose. I mean, I guess really you just play off of the animal basic behaviors. If you're going to raise one, then you're going to provide it with a nest, and that's going to override its default behavior to go build a nest. So it'll just kind of hang around your property, perhaps. I don't think necessarily we'll have the ability to like put up fences and keep them contained or anything. I just don't think that's going to happen. But
Okay.
okay, yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, I think mining.
Yeah, we missed mining here. Now, long ago, I had all sorts of ideas for this mining system, as far as like going out to a place. You didn't just mine and get something back immediately. You collected samples basically. So you might use a shovel and collect a bunch of earth samples, or you might use a pick to collect a bunch of ore samples, and then you would take it back to a workstation and process it. I'm trying to think if that still sounds good or if that sounds cumbersome. It's supposed to be an interesting way to include a lot of like crystals and minerals and stuff, that you would take your sample back to your workstation. You might use a sieve technique, or you might run it through a wash kind of. What do you call those? What would you use to get gold out of sample of dirt? What would you call that? I mean, you could pan for it, I guess. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That just, I don't know. When I describe it now, it's like that sounds like a giant
Sorry.
sapping all the fun out of it. I don't know. I mean, it's in some ways more interesting than just here's the, like we did in the MMO. Oh, here's the copper ore. So we click on it, we watch our character play an animation for 40 seconds, and I got 4 ore, and then we do it again over and over again. I kind of like the idea of prospecting. I think that's what I was trying to get to, is make some gameplay out of prospecting, out of trying different areas and finding richer soils and stuff, richer ore samples, and actually having like you as a character know where good ore is, based on perhaps some sort of invisible fractal map or something. I have a think on that one. We've got some
Oh
ideas there.
god. Yeah. Oh god, my typos.
And I'm recording this. I'm gonna put this on YouTube later so everyone can see forever. But that's okay. I completely screwed up the intro to this video, so if they make it this far.
Yeah, I sort of salute everyone who's still watching.
Yeah, I knew this was going to be probably one of the more dry discussions because this is just literally what we do every Saturday almost. We're just streaming it. Yeah, and I'm just now seeing because of the delay here. I'm just now seeing your response, knowing nothing. That's the kind of where I was going with the mining as kind of like having it be a skill discipline, and then we can use the perk system again, where when you unlock certain perks, you'll find more interesting things from your samples. Um, and I think it makes it more interesting to go out in the world, collect 20 samples, but you don't necessarily know exactly what you got until you go back to your, you know, mining camp, or you go back to some wagon you're towing around with you that has all your workstation stuff. You take it to the workstation, you refine your samples, and you find out what you got. And then it kind of gets interesting too because, like I said, you might want to actually start kind of. I know players have gamers have what do you call it, a aversion to taking notes, knowing where you got certain samples and such. But if you know that you went down in a cave and you collected these samples, and they were really awesome, then you probably want to go back there versus if you just start digging in the middle of nowhere and collect samples there, which may have next to nothing in them. Dirt, sand, and rhodochrosite. Knew I had to throw that in there.
Oh yeah.
Let's move on. Theft. We've got a little bit of time. We can go a little bit more. I figured we'd make this about an hour long and then call it. So let's think about theft a little bit. As soon as you pick something up, the guard is there.
Or a horse sees you and reports you to the
Yeah,
guards.
horse sees you. Um, no, actually, it brings up a lot of interesting. What was that game we were looking at just like a week ago? Hello Neighbor or something?
Oh yeah, that one. You sort of act as a burglar.
And it was interesting from an inspiration standpoint that to have an NPC that's so aggressive in trying to, it's not like in so many games the NPCs are just, what was that? Was that a rat? Must have been the wind. The NPCs don't pay attention to you. To have NPCs that actually pay attention to what you're doing and are kind of suspicious of you if you're in their house, that's kind of weird, unless if they don't have much trust for you, they probably would follow you from room to room. But yeah, what happens if you're caught stealing?
Crime and punishment.
I don't like that instantly guards are aware of you. I don't like things that break the reality of, if your response is this is not a real world, then it's kind of doing it wrong. On the same time, yeah, there's balance issues if you can just go into some abandoned place and just loot everything and leave and completely break, just bypass an entire set of economic progression. That's an issue. But I think the correct way to handle that is to actually put guards on valuable objects. I think if you
Maybe the. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, I talk a lot.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe the guards could have sort of like a cone detection in front of them where they see you around, and voice detect or sound detection, like area around them.
Yeah, I built the Antilia simulation engine to account for those kind of things. So when you're moving, your character will be it'll be sending little messages out. And then other creatures will be listening for those messages. They'll basically kind of like subscribe to them. And then when they get one of those messages, they can do additional math like what's the angle of this source sound or the source image from my viewpoint? Can I see this happen? That kind of thing. So I've built in mechanisms to handle that kind of a system. Yeah, the question is, okay, you break into someone's house. I'm just mentally walking through this. We've got a bunch of NPCs. We're simulating them all. This NPC goes in their house. They lock the doors. They go to sleep. You come in through a window or whatever in the middle of the night. Now you're in their house. They're asleep. What happens if you knock something over? How much noise you have to make. They wake up. What do? Do they run from the house? Do they arm themselves? It probably depends on the NPC, honestly. If they don't have any combat skills, then yeah, they should probably go running for a guard, right? We never got to play thieving in the MMO, and it's not actually. Well, the big problem with the MMO was just who are you going to steal from? um, you can't have players stealing from other players. It just becomes it doesn't work. So
Yeah, it was a real catastrophe when the ancient Ultima Online was released. People were stealing from you left, right, and center, stealing everything you own, even your clothes.
now in this simulated kind of world, will it be allowed? I don't know. I might make that like a game option that if it's turned off, then you just can't break into a player's house and steal. It will be, the game won't let you do it basically. Um, but I don't
Or
mind
the
the idea of having a game option that you can turn on, and yeah, you can steal from other players. If that's the way you and your friends want to play, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be allowed to play that way. But of course, I think you need, as a player, if you're going to play in that world, you're going to turn that option on. You probably should think about getting like a real like lockbox or something for your valuable stuff, and actually having those be difficult for the players to, just use a lockpick skill, and there is no such thing as a lock suddenly.
or they could be sort of like a middle ground where you can actually steal from containers and players, but the inventory wouldn't be the one that the players and NPCs are actually carrying, but it would be separate inventory that would be randomized, so that you always get something, but it wouldn't hurt the players. The
And
actual.
yeah, we tossed that idea around for the MMO, and that's actually the way I wanted to do it in the MMO. In this world, though, I don't know if that works because this is supposed to be a simulation, including an economic simulation. If you can start stealing things that are actually being poofed out of thin air, then we have a faucet now that can be exploited. And when it comes to like trying to make a working economy, every faucet you have to try and avoid. In fact, I even had a note here that maybe we would talk about taxes in this particular live stream, but I don't think we have time to start talking about taxes. Because who doesn't want to pay tax in a video game? But that just goes back to the whole, how do you make a working economy if you're not going to have tax? By tax, I'm pretty much talking just about like a property tax. If you own a house, then not a house, but if you own like a business, it might start to come into play. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have a source of income, there has to be a source of not excome, a money sink. Otherwise, you'd be collecting money infinitely, and you
Yeah,
have
and
so money you wouldn't be able to do anything else with it.
to make this whole simulation work, there has to be, there's already all these faucets. There's fishing, there's, plants growing, there's all this stuff producing resources that go into the world. We have to make sure that one, the NPCs they have to consume. NPCs have to eat and stuff to consume that value back out of the economy. We could, that's like a whole other discussion that probably belongs in a header. Getting a little sidetracked on that. Let's go back to thieving.
Hmm.
Another thing about thieving I want to try to avoid is it's so easy in, I always go to the Elder Scrolls games because they're such a good example for a lot of this stuff. It's so easy in some of those games to walk into a store, Just click your mouse at the wrong time and you've stolen something. It just takes one mouse click and you can steal something off of a shelf, you know. I would think there should at least be if you click on it, you go into an examine mode or something, and from there might be a steal this item. I don't like the idea that, or maybe there needs to be like you can only steal if you're actually in stealth mode or something. Was that the case in Elder Scrolls?
Well, there was one particular exploit in Skyrim where you placed something like a bucket or a basket on NPC's head, and you could steal anything in their house because they couldn't see anything.
No, I'm just talking about. I remember in those games that if you went into sneak mode, sometimes you would see like a red hand over an object, which means if you clicked on it, you were stealing. What I'm trying to prevent is you talk to an NPC or you go into a shop, you click on something and you've stolen it. I think that stealing something should be a very deliberate action, not something you can do just by accidentally misclicking.
Yeah, the inspection or like screen you've mentioned would be a viable option to prevent that. Yes.
And there's other reasons to have some sort of inspect mode, such as if you're going to buy something from an NPC, you probably want to look at it and maybe like with clothing, you probably want to try it on and stuff. I was kind of thinking that, yeah, that was kind of an idea I had that maybe items are not stolen until you actually leave the property, and then it'll perhaps pop up a little box. You know, you're carrying 4 items. Do you want to purchase these items? Do you want to steal these items? Put them back. So it's not till you try to leave the property that the stuff that you've picked up matters, because then you can kind of like go into a friend's house, mess with their stuff, and then just click on the door to leave, and just all their stuff goes back to where it was. That'd be rather nice versus people being able to move things around your house and make a mess. Yeah, in fact, books was exactly what I was thinking, knowing nothing. Um, okay. I'll keep thinking on that one a little bit, but I think we have some rough ideas of how thieving will work. I like the idea that it should at least be 2 clicks away, possibly require stealth mode to do. And if you're in somebody's house when you're not supposed to be there, I think that should kind of almost be its own thing, trespassing or something. You don't even have to steal necessarily. If someone comes around a corner and you're in your house when you're not supposed to be there, you might already be in trouble, basically.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap up here. Good place to stop, I think. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you found this somewhat interesting. Like I said, it's kind of a bit of a drier thing since we're literally just working on a text document here, but it's part of the game development process, so I want to share it. I've threatened to do a programming stream in the past. I thought this might be maybe a little more interesting than watching me write C++ code, at least for some. So I hope you enjoyed it, and hope that you'll tune in next time.
And I presume we will upload this video to YouTube as well, so people.
Yeah, it'll probably be around in an hour or two. Usually takes a little while to export, but it'll be there.